I see this on social media a lot. Anytime a property is for sale and a family gets it instead of a landlord, there's this collective sigh of relief. Ah, great, a family got it instead of a landlord. But I got to ask you, what about when a family wants to rent a property? Who are they going to rent it from if there are now landlords? Landlords are currently leaving the market in their droves. It is now at an unsustainable pace. Rents are rising, supply of rental property is shrinking, and the political appointments aimed at solving the crisis are collapsing. Is this still a housing crisis, or has it become full-blown chaos? What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode, and welcome back to season 6, no less. Yes, that's right. This week was the 5th anniversary of the podcast. It's now exactly 5 years old. In fact, I should have a cake and a party hat for this if you're watching on YouTube. And before we get into today's main topic, which you would have heard a little bit about there at the intro, I thought I would outline what to expect in season 6. And I got a couple of ideas to shake things up and to make it a little bit more interesting. And the first thing that I'm going to mention is that we are now making the podcast. We're going basically with a strategy that is YouTube first. And why is that? Well, there's a couple of reasons. YouTube has become the largest platform for listening to podcasts. So you can either listen to a podcast or you can watch the podcast. And what a lot of people do now is they'll watch the podcast for a couple of minutes and then they'll put in their headphones and they'll get about doing their work or whatever, and they'll just listen to it in the background. And that's happening more and more. So the other reason, there's a couple of reasons. The other reason is that YouTube is the second largest search engine on the planet now, after Google, which happens to own YouTube. And so it very much opens up the podcast to a much, much broader audience, which I'm trying to reach as many people as possible. And then the other thing that is, I'm not just celebrating 5 years of the podcast this week, but I'm also celebrating that the show is finally monetized on YouTube. That's right. We hit all of the criteria that you need in order to be eligible for monetization. And so, congratulations, we are now monetized. And so I want to make sure that I double down, and I just want to make sure that, I'm getting the most out of the podcast, out of the platform, and giving the most possible to you. So what can you expect other than YouTube first strategy? One of the things is I'm going to be doing longer interviews with guests. The way I've done it to date has been sort of 45 minutes to an hour sometimes. Rarely longer than that, but I've been watching some of the bigger podcasts that are out there, such as Diary of a CEO or Joe Rogan or any of these kind of guys, and they're going on for 1.5 to 2.5 hours, some cases. So I kind of thought to myself, am I missing a trick here, trying to cram it into 45 minutes? So I'm going to be doing longer podcasts. I'm certainly going to be giving more time to the process. And the other thing that I'm doing, which is completely new and a departure, and you'll see it next week for the first time, is I'm going to be doing in-person interviews. I'm not going to be doing Zoom calls any longer. I'm going to be doing in-person. Well, there may be the odd one. Like, we do have US guests coming on the podcast occasionally, and they do have some great insights. And I find it interesting to listen to international guests because they bring a different scenario or a different sort of way of looking at things, and they also open up different opportunities that might be quite common in one location but have not yet filtered into another. And so that's one of the reasons why we'll probably continue to do the old Zoom call, but the intention is for all the Irish episodes to be done in person in a studio, and for me to bring the podcast on tour. So I'm actually in the process of planning a UK tour where we'll be doing a number of guests in the UK. And I'm also looking at doing the same in Dubai. I'll go over to Dubai and I'll probably spend a week there doing a number of podcast interviews there. And I'm looking at other locations where I might set up for a bit of time. And like, for example, I heard that there's a few people hanging out in the Marbella area, so might go down there. I do know the area quite well, having lived in Spain for 5 years, so that may also be a location that we choose. And so what the great thing about in-person interviews is there's a better dynamic, but also it's more watchable. If you watched the 2 podcasts I did back in November in Dubai, you would have seen the back and forth between the different camera angles and stuff. If you've watched it, and in fact, the one that I did with JP de Villiers, that's hit over 1 million views in my Instagram. And so there was a great conversation had there, and you should certainly search Gavin J. Gallagher and Jean-Pierre or JP de Villiers, and you'll see it was shot and released around about November, December last year. But it's a great episode. I think a lot of people have liked it. So anyway, in parallel with all of doing that, I'm going to be producing weekly content over in my personal YouTube channel, Gavin J. Gallagher. And over there, it's going to be slightly different. So I'll be going for the longer interviews on this channel, but I'm going to be going for shorter, punchier, and much, much more sort of to the point videos that cover specific problems that people have and solutions to them. So, for example, I'm trying to raise money for a deal. How do you go about doing that? I'm going to answer very quickly within 10 to 15 minutes how to go about doing that, how to scale a portfolio, how to raise capital from investors, all of that stuff. So that's going to be over in my private Gavin Gallagher channel, Gavin J. Gallagher. So if you go and follow that now, subscribe to that now and hit the bell, you will make sure that you get the videos. And the first one is due out in the coming week. And all of the stuff that I teach my clients in the accelerator, I'm going to be giving all of that stuff away in the form of a weekly video. And of course, if you want, you can pick up all of that stuff for free. Just watch the videos. But for the vast majority of people, they want to accelerate their progress and they want to be given a diet of specific videos in a specific format, and they don't want to necessarily have to wait for 30 weeks for 30 lessons to come out. And so if you're interested in joining the next cohort of the accelerator, that is going to be starting in June. So it's only about 3-4 weeks away. And it's going to start with an in-person event with a guest speaker, and there's going to be lunch with myself, and you get to meet all the other members of the accelerator. And so if you are interested in joining the accelerator, you'll find a link below in the show notes. All right, enough of those kind of updates. I want to get into the main topic of today's conversation. And the thing is that I think we need to rethink the rental property narrative. Something I hear a lot is, oh, I'm so glad that a family bought it, as I mentioned at the start. And the suggestion being that landlord bad, owner-occupier good. And I think this is a major problem. We really do need to challenge this narrative because families rent too. It's not just that families that are buying are the only families out there that are trying to do this. As I might have mentioned before, if you're a regular listener, you would have heard me talk about, I rented for 7 years and I have 5 kids. So renting a property for 7 years with 5 kids, I'm very, very grateful that I had a great landlord. She was absolutely fantastic. She rented the property to me. I had complete security over that property for 7 years. She never gave me a bump in rent. She never forced me, to kind of increase or to do anything at all. Like she was a wonderful landlord. And there's a lot of people like that out there, reasonable people who own a property and just want somebody to move in and pay the rent on a regular basis without any trouble, without any hassle. Why did I rent instead of buy? Well, frankly, I had no choice. I was coming out of the terrible difficulties that I suffered in 2008. And by the way, they lasted for me 4 to 5 years. And for the vast majority of people that got caught in 2008, some people, and I know a few of them, are still fighting that battle. It is not an easy thing. And like in my case, my finances were a complete shit show. I couldn't pull together a deposit. It was hand-to-mouth existence. And even if I could pull together the deposit needed, the banks would not touch me with a barge pole. I had my credit was like radioactive. And so there's the reason why somebody's out there renting when the conventional wisdom is like, oh, sure, everyone would buy it makes more sense to buy. Yeah, it makes more sense, sure. But can you pull together the deposit? Do you have enough funds to do that? Do you qualify for the mortgage? All of these questions. Now, it's not just me in that situation. I have a good pal that I went to school with. He built up his career, and he was abroad in Asia in a very well-paying job. He was getting a lot more than he would earn in this country, but his children had reached the age where they were going to be commencing secondary school. And so he and his wife, who's also Irish, decided, let's get back to Ireland. Let's put them into secondary school in Ireland. And so they decided to come home. Now, well paid, but not coming home to, he doesn't want to come home to no job. So first of all, found himself a good job in the same sector that he worked in, and came back, but didn't have anywhere to buy, didn't have anything in mind to do straight away. What he wanted to do was arrive back home, make sure they've made the right decision, put the kids into the school, and then that meant that they had to rent. So they rented for a couple of years. Nice house, 3 kids and themselves, and explained to me, what is a landlord doing wrong renting to a family? That, in my book, is a good service. And just because somebody decides to rent over purchasing, the landlord should not be looked at as a villain because of that. Many big companies have reported that they are struggling to recruit the staff, the senior staff and management staff that they need. And so in order to find them, they look abroad, and they use overseas headhunters and recruitment businesses and stuff like that. And they find somebody, a great candidate, and they'll offer them a job. Now, this happens in a lot of the big firms and the professional firms, the big accounting firms like Grant Thornton. Grant Thornton reported back in 2023 that of all of the people they had offered jobs to overseas to come back to Ireland and take a senior position, 25 to 30% of all those offers were declined. And why were they declined? It was because they could not secure accommodation to move over to. You can't buy a property when you live abroad and just arrive into it and just move in on the day. And anyone who says that you can, yeah, theoretically you can, but like somebody who is relocating for a job, there are so many things that you have to factor in there. You've got people that can, maybe your spouse is not from that country. So it's not a given that you're going to enjoy working there or that it's all going to work out. Maybe your kids are not going to enjoy it. Maybe you're going to do it for a year and see how you get on and see what it's like to work in this place. Do you enjoy the work environment? Do you like the company culture? All of this stuff factors in. Somebody is not going to buy a property and then move over and then find that, oh, wow, this didn't work out very well, and then have to put the property up for sale again. What they're going to do is rent a place, and there needs to be a housing stock available for those people to do that. So, and it's also actually, it's not isolated to Grant Thornton by any means. This is across the board. This is a major issue. And it is actually impacting the economy in a big way. It's holding back growth in that sector. And if you hold back growth, it means reduced revenues from the firm, which means reduced employment, which means reduced tax take. All of this is impacting the economy in a negative way. The next thing I want to talk about is landlords leaving the market at an unsustainable pace. This came out during the week from Sherry Fitzgerald, and they reported it, that of all of the sales that they have done in the first quarter of 2025, which has just come out, that 30% of all properties that were sold by landlords in the first quarter of the year. 30%. And yet, when you look at the amount of properties that have been purchased in the same period of time, only 8% were landlords. So that's a net loss of 22% of the landlords in just 3 months. So if you think about this, if you scale that up across an entire year, and if you scale it up across all of the firms selling property across the entire country, you start to see that we are going to very quickly run out of rental properties. Already there's a shortage of them, but we're going to be seeing far, far less properties available to rent on the market. The only thing that will be available to rent on the market will be the big funds that have the huge, big, apartment buildings. There will be an apartment building with 100 apartments or 200 apartments or whatever. Those will be the only ones that are available to rent. There will be no homes with gardens that families could rent. Those will just not be an option in the very near future if this continues to go the way it's going. So this needs attention immediately. If we don't take care of this, rents are going to get even crazier, and they're already at a crazy amount. And they're at a crazy amount because there's so few properties in the market. And there's so many people chasing so few properties, and yet you've got the rent pressure zones keeping a lid on prices. So the people who are in the property that are enjoying that lower rent, they're not going anywhere because they know that there's a very strong likelihood they won't find this same property at the same rent anywhere else. They know what it's like out there. So they're going to stay put. And the people that are out there looking, the only options they're going to have are buying a property or else renting from somebody that has got a new property coming on the market for the first time. And if that's the case, the rents are going to be set to the much higher level. So there's this dysfunction happening now in the market where it's just simply not working anymore. Just the government has to do something. And they talked about the abolition of the rent pressure zone back in February. I haven't heard anything since. And so I would like to know what's going on there. We do need something to take place fairly quickly. What about taxation? There's a reason that all the landlords are pulling out of the market. They are taxed heavily, and there are other options out there for them. And so either we take care of this, or we're going to continue to see this complete departure from the entire market of all of these landlords. They're leaving in their drones, and the end result is going to be like, and the worst thing about it is that because of the narrative out there that landlords are bad, owner-occupiers are good, what it's doing is every time another landlord leaves, it's like, great, they've left, good riddance. What that just means is that rents have now gone up higher. Rents are being pushed up because of that, because every time there's a property removed from the supply, it means that demand is increased. Now, I've talked about this at length, but we also need a supply of new homes. We've got 80 to 100,000 is the target number that we should be hitting at the moment. And we're supposed to be, the government is actually aiming for 34,000 at the moment. This year, there was a target of 34,000, and I think we're barely going to crack 31 and a bit. We're not going to achieve more than 32,000. And yet, everyone knows that you need at least 60, 80, 100,000 a year in order to balance out where we're at. So we're at least 50,000 behind. This is a major, major issue. Things are getting worse faster than ever. And the solution that was suggested, and everyone was kind of going, oh, finally, there's a solution on the cards. The solution was to appoint a housing czar. And this person was going to have the all-powerful role of heading up the Housing Activation Office. And the idea here, and I applaud the idea, is cut through all the bureaucracy, ramp up production, and deliver tens of thousands of new homes. Get rid of the blockages in planning, whatever it is that's holding up the delays, and let's just get this moving. That's what we need. Joined up thinking, improved efficiency of the systems. The processes have to be streamlined. What happens? Political infighting. Brendan McDonough, the CEO of NAMA, he was earmarked for the job and he was proposed as head. But whoever decided on that declined to notify the other party in government. And so they had a falling out over it. And in the end, Brendan McDonough withdrew his name. He did not want to be caught up in the middle of this bun fight. And so he is now stepped aside and we're back to square one. There is nobody there. This is one of the biggest issues that faces the state, and yet we can't even agree who's going to take on the job. And I understand one of the problems with this was that the proposed salary. So he is currently CEO of NAMA, major business, semi-state, whatever you want to call it. And I think his salary there at the moment is 430,000. And it was proposed that he would move to this new role and he would take the same salary and move across. That would mean that he was earning more than the current Taoiseach earns. Now, that might sound 430,000, it's a big salary. It might sound like a lot, but in the context of a senior guy in a major organization, that is peanuts. And it might seem silly to say that, but let's be honest here. We have a national crisis. We need somebody who is exceptional to get us out of this crisis. We need somebody with the skills, the talent, the knowledge, the network, the understanding of all of the processes. We need that kind of person to tackle the crisis. And there is no chance we're going to find like anyone even remotely capable inside of the civil service. The civil service is not the place where that kind of individual would ever be, because that kind of individual can go out there and command a huge salary in a PLC or something like that. So why would they opt to go and get into an area where their salary is capped? If you look at what we need here is a world-class leader that can solve this problem. And that same person would easily be able to run a business like a major PLC, let's say, for example, CRH or Kingspan. These are huge global businesses with billions in revenue. But that is the kind of person you need running this, solving the problem that we have. We have a national crisis and we need somebody at that level to solve it. Now, I say at the moment we're building about 30,000 units and we should be building, say, 80,000. That's a 50,000 home a year shortfall. And if we take the average house price at about, we'll say nationally, 350,000, that is a 17.5 billion euro annual problem that we have. And, how do we solve that? That is a huge, that is the size of some of these big global behemoth businesses. That's the kind of money that they create and that they need to kind of churn over. You need a big organization around that. You need somebody who has that kind of capability to take on a role like that. And so what does the CEO of CRH earn? Albert Manifold took home 13 million euro last year. What does Jean Murtha, the CEO of Kingspan, earn? He earned 4.2 million euro last year. And his base salary is 1 million. And yet the government fall out over 430,000 because it was deemed too much to pay somebody to take on this national crisis, take on the role of that. We need a CEO level, like a PLC, a listed company, stock market listed company. We need somebody of a CEO at that level. We need this person to come in, and yet the politicians are balking at a salary that was 10% of what Kingspan pay their CEO. I just think that the same person who is needed for this role could go out there in the morning and command that kind of salary in the big sort of PLC sector. So I think the politicians really do need to get off their high horse. We don't need ideology, and we don't need throwing out the baby with the bathwater, as we would say. We need to, all of this kind of ideology needs to be replaced by effectiveness and pragmatism. After all, if it was your house burning down, would you waste precious time haggling over the firefighters' wages? And then the next thing to talk about, guys, is the economic headwinds that we have in front of us. We need to wake up, and we need to wake up quickly. The central bank governor, Gabriel Makhlouf, he gave a very stark warning in the past week. And he said that the US tariffs, the Trump tariffs, and I did an episode about that just a few weeks ago, they represent a major downside risk to the economy. The reason he said that is because the economy is deeply reliant on the US multinational sector. That is the big pharma companies and the big tech companies. And they're all based here. Like their European and international headquarters are all here in Ireland. And if foreign investment from those firms slows down, so does tax revenue and so does job growth. And we cannot afford a sluggish response to the housing crisis and the economic stability issue simultaneously. It is just too much. I don't think the country will be able to survive that kind of a shake. And so we really need to be careful about where we're going with all of this. So what are my closing thoughts on this? I'm going to ask a couple of questions. Do you think we still have a housing crisis, or has this tipped into housing chaos? Another question. Do we want to build a system where the only people of value are the ones that are owner-occupiers? That the renters do not deserve the same sort of quality of life or the same appreciation of their situation? Surely we want a housing market that works for all families, not just people that qualify for a mortgage. Guys, I hope you found this one useful. Don't forget to think about the accelerator, the June cohort's only 2 or 3 weeks away, maybe three or 4 weeks away to the actual event. It's rapidly approaching. You'll find a link in the show notes below. And I will catch you in the next one.